How exactly do you start a new garden in the springtime? Today I'm going to show you how. G'day there, I'm Dana from Pewakaka Valley Homestead. Today I'm going to be starting a brand new garden, and I thought I'd bring you along for the journey, show you exactly how you get a brand new garden up and running and ready to get plants in as quickly as possible. Now this is our new garden area, and while it's not spring here, it's still autumn. I am going to be getting it ready for our spring planting, and the process is exactly the same whether it's spring or autumn. And there are some very noisy ducks coming to visit me. So this area here, we've actually had some tarpaulin down on it to kill off the grass. We haven't had it down long enough for the grass to actually dissolve, but it has pretty much just died. Now there are so many different ways to get a new garden started, and if you are brand new to gardening, it can be actually really overwhelming to know what the best way is and trying to decide which is going to work best for you. One of the lowest input ways of starting a new garden is to literally just kill off the weeds or scrape off the weeds with a shovel and plant straight into the ground. There are some merits to doing that. One, it's low cost. Two, it's really quite quick and easy once you get the dirt and the sod off the top. You've got some soil there. The downside to it is it's usually really compacted. It is often quite devoid of organic matter, and the other is that it can either get really dry or really boggy depending on where it is. Another really common method is to put down a thick layer of newspaper and then just start building up layers on top of that. That's often called lasagna gardening, and you can put your leaves, manure, straw, garden waste, all sorts of things in layers, and then top it off with a big thick layer of compost and or some topsoil and plant straight into that. The upside to doing that is it uses a lot of scraps and material that you already have around the place. The grass is usually killed off really quickly by a good thick layer of newspaper, and it's sort of a low cost way. You end up with a raised bed that's full of organic matter, and it's a really good option. What we're doing here is a little bit of a combination of a few different things. I have found this works really well for our situation. Our dirt here, it is really high in minerals, you know, just a soil, it's quite clayey. However, it does tend to retain water in certain places, and then during the summer it will dry out completely, so it needs a lot of organic matter to be added to it. So what we have decided to do is sort of build raised beds on top of the dirt that we already have. So we kind of loosen the soil that we've got and then add a good layer of compost and then just plant straight into the top. If we've got time to, what we try and do is put a tarp on for a couple of months, ideally up to sort of 3 months. If it had been more, this has been about 4 or 5 weeks that we had this tarped, and it was just enough to kill off the grass, but it hasn't been enough for it to start breaking down properly. If you have time to be able to do it for about 3 months, it's usually enough that when you take the tarp off, you'll pull it off and it'll be perfectly clear ground. The worms will have come up and done their thing and taken all that organic matter down into the earth. So we don't really have the time to be doing that, so what we're going to do is fork over this ground, add some compost, and then on top of that add a good layer of mulch. This mulch will help keep the moisture in, it helps keeps the weed pressure down, and it helps encourage sort of the worm life to happen and to get up from the soil into the compost and start doing the things that they need to do to make really good healthy soil. If you're not sure, this is what we mean by tarping. This is what we've done in our raised garden beds in the vegetable garden, and underneath here is the plants that we're growing in there already, whatever weeds have grown, and a layer of compost. And then this is just actually old billboard sign material that we've cut to fit, and we just weight it down and leave it for a while and it all sort of breaks down. The other option is to use a black plastic like this, or a silage tarp. If you've got any perennial weeds, so you're talking things like dock, and we've got gorse, which is never so nice, any of those sort of more perennial weeds, the invasive grasses, it's really important that you try and get that root system out. We're quite lucky in this particular garden bed that there was a couple of gorse plants that I dug out, a couple of dock plants that I've dug out, and other than that it's just paddock grass, so it's not a really invasive grass, and so I'm just going to cover it up. So I'm going to set this camera up and we'll see how we get on. So first things first, we're going to try and remove some of the weeds and give it a light forking just to loosen the soil. I really like this garden weeder. It's just a piece of heavy duty wire turned into a hook with some plastic around the edge. It's really great for getting in and getting the roots out. The aim of the game when you're loosening the soil is not to tip it over and smash it to pieces. You're literally just putting your fork into the ground as far as it'll go and swing it on a little bit just to loosen it up. I don't like flipping the soil, and I don't like double digging or any of those sorts of methods. I think that the soil should stay in the order that it is in. And all I'm doing, I don't do this often, this is just a break in the soil. The aim is just to loosen it up a little. Once you've done that, the next thing you can decide to do is whether you want to put newspaper down. I'm not going to bother. I'm just going to put a good layer of compost over the top. This is our big pile of compost that we brought in. It's just cheap farmyard compost. It's a mixture of cow poo and sawdust that's been allowed to compost down. We just buy it from the local nursery and they bring out the big truck and deliver it for us. It's probably not the best quality compost around, but it's something that we can afford to do, and it's got to be better than the nothing. If you're not lazy like me, you can use the garden rake to level that out. I'm not entirely sure where the rake is right now, so my foot it is. Now you can plant directly into there. I've only put about 2 inches of compost onto there. You can plant directly into there and it'll be good as gold. What we've decided to do is to put a layer of wood mulch over the top, and that will help keep the weeds down a little bit better. These garden beds here we're planting predominantly in sort of those high calorie crops that we're planting. You don't maintain them so much, right? So they're a wee bit further away from the house. We're doing pumpkins and onions and squashes and yams out in this area. So I am planning on not weeding it all the time, so I'm going to put a really big layer of wood mulch over the top as well. It really is up to you how much compost you decide to put into your garden beds. We're just doing a little bit because it's expensive, we're having to buy it in, and I plan on adding to this every year. In the actual vegetable garden, had this been a raised bed in the actual vegetable garden, I would have completely filled it up with compost, but we just don't have the money at the moment to be able to fill all these massive beds with paid for compost, so we're just going to do what we can. I mean, at the end of the day, plants can grow straight in dirt, they don't need the compost, so we're considering this an extra bonus to be able to put the compost on the top and to help improve that soil. And we will see how the crops grow, but I'm sure they'll be perfectly fine. This is some waste that we had in the goat shed that we've dug out, and we're going to put it underneath the compost, particularly in these 2 lower beds, which are the ones we're going to be putting squash in. Squash and pumpkins are really heavy feeders. They need lots and lots of goodness, so we thought the extra manure and urine and things would go well in here. So we plan on just covering those with some compost over the top. I'll spread them out when I find my rake. And this is the garden bed that we grew the yams in this year. They're called New Zealand yams, also known as oca. And honestly, they didn't do as well as maybe they should have. They were pretty much neglected out here and the soil's not great. That's why we're developing these garden beds. So these are just the scraps, and I'm just going to leave them here and put the compost over the top, because this bed will have yams in it again, so I don't mind if there's little yams left in the soil to regrow. So there you have it, a bed ready to go. Now it is really important that if you're going to be putting a plant straight in here, you need to be pulling the wood mulch right back, finding the compost layer, and then digging in here to put your plants. So your plants are being planted right down in the compost as close to the soil as possible. This wood mulch is great for keeping the ground wet, great for keeping the weeds down, but it is terrible for plants to grow in. And the other thing is, if your compost, like ours, is still hot, it's still steaming, it's not actually ready to plant into, and you'll find that if you put plants in there, they will really suffer for a lack of nitrogen. Now, if you don't have enough time for this compost to break down, there are a few things that you can do to expedite that. One of them is to add some high nitrogen fertilizer, so maybe a chicken poo tea. You don't want to be applying straight chicken poo to your baby plants or you'll just burn them. Digging in a whole lot of like a blood and bone product or a blood meal product. All of these things will add extra nitrogen, which will give your soil a chance for that compost to finish breaking down before it is actually required to be the nitrogen source for your plants. Compost itself is not actually a fertilizer, it's actually really good for feeding the soil, but it's not so great for feeding the plants. You need the microbiota and the worms and things to be breaking down the compost and making those things available for your plants. So usually what you want to be doing is putting in some compost as well as adding one of those sort of more high nitrogen sort of fertilizers, especially if you're trying to grow leafy greens. I'll let you into a little secret. I haven't actually done all of these gardens. I have only just done this corner so that I can show you exactly how to do it. That's because I'm trying to sneak this video in while the baby's still sleeping, and he's not awake yet, but I didn't want to risk trying to put the compost on everything and then have him wake up before I could finish the video. Now if you have other garden waste, other manure, other compost sources or whatever, you can also add that to this pile. I personally would put the loosened dirt and then whatever additional farmyard waste, whatever, and then your compost and then your mulch on top. Potentially with a layer of newspaper at the bottom if that's the way you want to go, or cardboard. Corrugated cardboard's another really good option. Coffee sacks are another option for helping keep those weeds out. They will break down really well, but they will be in place long enough to help keep the weeds out until the weed roots actually die off from lack of light. If you're not sure if you want to grow a garden this year, I really encourage you even to start just a little square plot. Even if you want to put it in the side of a flower garden or on the edge of your lawn, try and get something growing. You'll be surprised at actually how easy it is. It can be intimidating, but actually the very first step you need to take is just to do something about it. So I hope you found this video helpful. If you have, hit the like button and maybe consider subscribing to our channel. We bring you videos twice a week on growing and preserving your own food and other homesteading bits and pieces. We'll see you in the next one.